Okay, we're into the common data set for St. Olaf. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is section C1, and it looks at the total number of freshmen that have applied. And one of the things you can do by looking at that is it's broken down by males and females. So it's a great way of looking and seeing if there's any gender skew. In case you didn't realize this, oftentimes there's a pretty noticeable advantage for men in the admissions process at certain colleges. I remember a few years ago when the director of admission at Kenyon College came out and was real honest with the public, and she was kind of tarred and feathered, but she just wrote a great New York Times piece about the differences between men and women in the applicant process. You get a chance by looking at that. You can look at the number of men that were applied, number of men that were admitted, the percentage of men that were applied, the percentage of women that were admitted, percentage that enroll. All that data is there. It's very, very helpful. You move on to section C2, and you can see this is actually the single best way to find out what your chances of getting waitlisted are, because you can see the waitlist data there. It tells you how many people were offered a place on the waitlist, and how many people chose to stay on the waitlist, and how many people were taken off the waitlist. And so waitlists are used very differently by schools. Sometimes they're courtesy waitlists for public relations purposes with key feeder schools or alumni or siblings or other constituencies. And then other times they're just insurance policies in case the school gets a low yield and they don't get the number of students that they actually are hoping to get. And then schools go to their waitlist to actually fill in some remaining openings that they might have in the dorms. So, but you can get a sense of that, and this is a great way of knowing. So when you look at St. Olaf, just look at the information. They offered 627 people spots on the wait list, and usually when you get a wait list offer, they'll send you a notice and they'll ask you if you want to be on it. 233 said, yeah, put me on the wait list. And how many did they take? 1. So you kind of know that if you get waitlisted there, it's just move on. It's not happening. So it's really helpful for that. Now we're going to move on down. You can look at C3. It's really interesting. C4. But let's look at C5, which is also very interesting. In section C5, it lets you know what is required versus what is recommended, and you can get a sense of what the expectation is in terms of your courses for high school from them. When you move on down to section C7 in the common data set, you'll see some more information that's really helpful. It lets you know what factors are weighed more highly than others in the process. So you see they break down every factor by very important, or considered. So in the case of, we just talked about that from the feedback from the NACAC research. But now what you're getting is you're getting that specific information for your actual schools that you are either seriously considering applying to or you've already made up your mind you're going to apply to. So in the case of Olaf, they're saying the rigor of the secondary school curriculum, the academic GPA, and the essay. Those three things carry the most weight for them. So what's even better about this than the tips, in the tips, essays were number 5, but Olaf's telling you it's one of the top 3. Now you have that information for that school. Then you can go look at other factors like what is important. In their case, they're saying class rank, test scores. They have an interview, and the interview is length is really important. So that's not true of every place. So and you see the other things, extracurriculars, character, and that sort of thing. So this will allow you to know what factors on a school by school basis carry the most weight, which is just invaluable and salient information if you're looking at any particular schools. And it will also let you know how to increase your chances of getting in, because it's going to let you know, it's going to give you a roadmap for you as to how this school is going to do its evaluation. Okay, you move on down to section 8, C8. It's pretty cool because it's going to let you know how the college views the ACT, SAT writing, and subject tests. Colleges are absolutely all over the place when it comes to whether or not they factor in the SAT writing test. For the ACT test, is the writing portion required? It's going to let you know that. This is going to vary from school to school. And of course, you're not looking at the current edition. You better go to the website just to make sure that you are, in fact, getting the current year's information, because this stuff can change from year to year. But usually it doesn't change that much. It's usually pretty consistent. Now, C9, absolutely love C9, looking at C9, because in section C9, you're going to get the actual breakdown of the scores. And that's actually going to be just critical. So you look at C9, it's going to let you know the percentage of people that submitted ACT and SAT. That's all there. In the case of, St. Olaf, a lot of times in the Midwest, we talked about this. The ACT, of course, coming out of Iowa. It's a Midwest test, and so they get more ACTs than they do SATs. Just interesting information for you to know. It lets you know the range, the 25th to 75th percentile range for the scores. But there's a lot of other sources, College Navigators, that gives you that. What I love, and I look at C9, is the actual breakdown. This is what I find to be extremely helpful. So look at, for example, how many students had testing between 4 and 500, 5 and 600, or between 18 and 23, 24 and 29, or 30 and 36 if you're an ACT person. You can see that. And what this does is it really lets you put your scores in context. Unless you have some of the hooks that we discussed in the last DVD, you kind of know that you really need to be in the range of where schools are to have a real decent chance of being admitted. So it's really cool that way. And it'll allow you to know how much emphasis a school actually puts on testing too. How often do they go outside of their profile? Do they have really clear cutoffs so they don't deviate? If they do, if you see your scores and there's really almost nobody in your score range, then I'll give you an example. So we look at St. Olaf, right? And when you're looking at math test scores on the SAT between let's say under 500, anywhere in the 400s, 300s, 200s, only 4% of students have a math SAT in the 200s, 300s, or 400s. So unless you have some really high-powered hook going for you, chances are that if that's where your testing is, you're not getting in there. Maybe it could be a reach on your list, but you don't want too many schools with reaches like that. So they really let you know whether or not your test scores give you a decent chance. And if you combine that with the data where they tell you what they value the most, you'll let you know whether or not you have the hooks to allow yourself to be outside of their profile, or at least have a good shot at it. So it's very helpful, because nothing's worse than getting blindsided. If you're not going to get in, it's nice to kind of know that probably don't have that good of a